Welcome everyone to the Clairmont Road Drainage and Resurfacing Project public meeting. Thank you for attending. We'll start the presentation here in just a moment. It looks like we've got a good number of people on Clairmont Road attending, so we're excited about that. But to get started, before we actually start getting into the meat of the presentation, I wanted to go over a few clerical items. For the format of the meeting. Since we are in Zoom, I just wanted to point out some of the functionality that we're hoping that we can utilize. One of the things that you may notice right away is you are automatically muted. Therefore, if you have a question or you're trying to unmute yourself because you're having any trouble, the best way to get a hold of us, to contact us during this meeting, is to use that chat button. If you select it, you should be able to reach everybody who's attending the meeting by making sure that the drop-down box says everyone. If you want to send a private note just to me, the host, or anybody else, you can also utilize that function as well. And just as a reminder, which you guys have seen in every Focus On note that has been given out, if you'd like to be added to an email listserv for the updates for Clairmont Road, please reach out to Mandy. Her email address is listed here. It's mdesanto@uaoh.net. So we're going to start off by introducing all of the teams. I'll start with myself. I'm Carla Udabrowski, the city engineer. And I'll go ahead and introduce all the members from UA. We have Gary Wilfong. He is the Public Service Director. Aaron Scott, the Assistant City Engineer. Mandy DeSanto, our Administrative Assistant. Isai Garcia, he'll be the inspector on the project when we go to construction. And Sebastian French, the engineering coordinator and the primary contact if you need us in the office. And with that, I will hand it over to our design team, JMT, Josh Connolly.
Thanks, Carla. Hi, everybody. My name is Josh Conley. I'm the project manager for JMT for the Clairmont Road Drainage Project. With us today, I have Matt Smith. He is our senior water resources engineer, and Colin Marshall, who is our water resources engineer for the project. Thanks, Carla.
Thanks, Josh. So the presentation itself will be very quick. I'm going to briefly go over the history of drainage in the area, and then JMT will take it over and go over their design alternatives. And then we'll talk about the timeline and the next steps moving forward. And just for everybody, if you have questions, please feel free to utilize that chat box. At the end, we will try to answer every question that is in there. Or if you'd like to speak, we will be able to unmute you if you are interested by using the hand raise function, which we'll go over at the end of the presentation. So diving into the history, we've had numerous complaints about drainage in this area for years. We had a lot of reports of standing water in 2020. In March and May of that year, there was widespread flooding. That map on the right-hand side shows a bunch of the locations where we had reports of water in basement from different residents related to those rain events. I call out the event in 2020 because I wanted to make sure everybody understood as we move forward with these drainage improvements, that type of significant and substantial rain event isn't something that design engineers target to remedy. That's going to be a little bit outside of where we're going to be able to make improvements. But we'll talk through what you can expect to see maybe following an event like that. I don't want you to think that 2020 is the only time that we've had drainage complaints. we've had a number throughout the years for primarily standing water in the yards, and particularly in 2018 and 2019, we had a number of calls following our SSS project, also known as the Sustainable Sewer Solution Project. You should have received numerous notifications for that project as well, but just in case maybe you weren't living along the street at that time, that project was an effort to keep rainwater out of the sanitary sewer system, because the sanitary sewer system isn't intended to collect rainwater. So in your area, all of the sanitary main that runs along the road and all of the private laterals that run from your house all the way to the main of the street were lined with a very thin liner on the inside of that pipe in order to keep the rainwater out. And one of the complaints that we got was that we were told that people thought we were causing a flooding issue. But ultimately, what we were doing was keeping the rainwater out. So there may be some standing water in areas that may have been able to draw down quicker into the sanitary sewer system, but that was never the intention for that lateral to function in that way. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the delay for this drainage improvement and the road work on Clairmont. You guys have been extremely patient, and we appreciate that, because we realize that Clairmont Road, it needs a little bit of love. That road is starting to fall apart. It desperately needs to be repaved. But in 2021, when we were looking at doing the drainage improvements then, and then coming through and doing the road work, we weren't satisfied with the amount of design work that was done last year, and we didn't feel that we had done our due diligence. Fast forward, we hired JMT to look into some drainage alternatives just to make sure that we are moving forward with the best improvement that we can. And with that, I will hand it over to the JMT team.
Thanks, Carla. So just to reiterate a little bit about what Carla said. So Carla reached out to us earlier this year to investigate a little bit more into what the issues are out on Clairmont Road. And with the elimination of the infiltration into the sanitary lines, which it's not supposed to do, that project was a success, because now the water is not infiltrating into that system. So we went out and we did a site visit. We got survey just to see where the problems were, where the water was ponding. We went out after it rained, when it snowed, to see where the snow was sitting and where the rain was ponding up, just to see and to confirm our findings from the survey. We did look at a few alternatives. Some of the alternatives are infiltration type alternatives. There are other collection methods, such as catch basins, infiltration trenches, fire retention, and a couple other alternatives that I'll let my experts, Matt and Colin, talk a little bit more about. So that's where we are now. We have been looking at this for a few months, and we are going to show you some of the alternatives and the recommended solution. So Matt, you want to take it over from here?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. And as Carla and Josh kind of alluded to, with the lining of the sewer job, and kind of getting some feedback from the city up front before we started looking into some of these alternatives, we really want to try and recreate that infiltration process, because it seemed to be working, and the complaints started coming or being more noticeable when that infiltration of the rainwater was lost, or essentially pushed downstream to the street with the lining operation. So those are kind of some of the first things. And you see the two sections we have here are just some typical sections that we were exploring with some potential solutions in some of the trouble spots where we identified from our field visits ponding water and excess runoff reaching these points. Ultimately, with these, they come with some pretty strict maintenance guidelines to these. And in talking with the city, and just from observance of some of the usual patterns and what's used, these would all have to be placed next to the roadway section. And if vehicles are parking, maintenance vehicles, lawn care, any additional overflow parking for parties and events on the street, these infiltration practices are highly susceptible to being heavily compacted. And if you're parking vehicles on these, it really has a detrimental effect on these types of devices for the long term and longevity of these. And really how you fix them after they become heavily compacted is you have to rip them out again and reinstall the media. And it becomes a process of having to almost redo this if they become damaged and begin to fail from an infiltration standpoint. So with those kind of factors in play and trying to maintain kind of the level of service that's utilized on the street and with the front yards and the parking availability, we kind of eliminated those from the investigation and started looking at more of a traditional storm drain solution where we would utilize catch basins in some of the trouble spots to draw down the water for these events. And I just want to quickly note on what Carla said. When we design these are typically done for a much smaller storm event. Some of those rain events that are very, very flashy or put a lot of water over a long period of time, your 5, 6, 7-inch rainstorms, there's going to be flooding and ponding associated with that. With any design, it'd just be a very, very intricate design to be able to accommodate storms of that size. These systems are in place to catch your normal, 1/2-inch, 1-inch rainstorm events so that water draws down, has a place to get out, and has a stable downstream conveyance to get away from the site and is not sitting there in the front of the yards or on the side of the road. One of the other options we did look at was, you see a picture of the concrete pavers there. Really, we were seeing if this would help, but that's more of a stabilization method that we implement a lot of those things typically on stormwater maintenance access roads. And that's there to allow the grass and vegetation to grow through these concrete pavers and allow some traction for vehicles to drive over that without ripping up the earth or causing any additional erosion that would lead to the failure of a device. From a drainage standpoint, those items don't really capture or convey any real volume, and it didn't seem like a very viable solution to implement this along the entire stretch of the roadway for some of those reasons. With that, then I'm going to ask Colin to share his screen with you, and I wanted to pull up what we've come across upon as the preferred option for moving forward with kind of resolving some of these drainage issues. So Colin, if you want to pull that up, I'll give you a minute. I know it's a larger file. And I'll kind of turn it over to Colin to kind of walk through the final design elements and some of the items we took into consideration while laying this design out.
Thank you, Matt. Is the screen showing up? Can you guys see it? Perfect. Thanks a lot, Matt. Yeah, like Matt alluded to, after weighing the pros and cons of a few alternatives, we did decide to go with a catch basin and storm sewer design. It goes roughly from 4191 to all the way down to 4103 Clairmont, and it ties into an existing catch basin that's there already. So like we talked about, after going through on a project site investigation, we found there were a lot of sump points, a lot of low spots where there was ponding after a small rain event. And we kind of took note of that, and we tried to place a lot of our catch basins in those areas where we saw that there would be problems with ponding. So you can see here, a lot of the main trunk line is going to be on the west side of Clairmont to begin with. And this is due largely in part by trying to avoid conflicts with the existing water utilities that are in the ground already. You can see there's some water lines on the east side and some laterals that we wanted to avoid. So we could put some catch basins on within the yards of these on the east side, and then bring it back over to the west side and kind of follow it along down here. We're going to be using 15-inch storm sewer pipes to help promote this positive drainage down to the existing inlet. once we get down here closer to just before 4137 Clairmont Road, we have catch basins on the west side that we then bring back over to the east side. We decided to do that because there are a couple of landscaped areas and a lot of trees that go all the way up to the roadside. So we didn't want to get in the way of that and cause any impacts to those. So just trying to minimize impacts with this design. We bring it all the way down and we tie into an existing inlet. And so we're hoping that this design does alleviate the ponding, and it should with the catch basins being put in place. There will be some minor regrading that will need to be done in a couple of the yards just to promote that drainage, getting it from the road and the yards into the catch basins. Looking at the pros and cons of this, the good thing is compared to the other options, there won't be any loss of roadside parking, which was seemed to be a potential concern. It does target the problem of not being able to alleviate the ponding issues. And thankfully, we'll be able to avoid a lot of the conflicts with any sanitary sewer or water lines. And so comparatively, we decided this storm sewer design to be the best option moving forward.
Great.
And yeah, so Carla, we can bring it back to you.
All right, let me share my screen. Can you see the screen?
Not yet, no, Carla. Sorry, we're
Nope.
still seeing Colin's screen.
Thank you.
We've got it now if you go into presentation mode.
Great, thank you. Still see the screen?
We got it.
Thank you. So talking through the next steps, JMT has a substantial amount of the design work completed, but there will be some final design aspects. So if there are questions or if you weren't really able to see your house, your parcel close up, that's something that you can still reach out to us, preferably in the near future, so that we can get you a little bit more information about the impacts that you could see in front of your house. But that's something that I believe JMT plans on doing within the next couple of weeks. And then our contractor, Strasser Paving, is planning on doing the drainage improvements. We anticipate that they're going to start in early September. There's a little bit of flexibility there. The ultimate goal is to make sure that we can get the drainage installed and the road paved before the weather turns. But we'd also like to get this work done as soon as possible. As I'm sure many of you are aware, there are some supply chain issues and it is affecting the construction industry. So we are waiting on the exact delivery timeline for those catch basin structures and the pipeline. So we're hopeful to have a little bit more information to provide a better timeline to everyone. So definitely look for more of those focus on notices that will give you an idea of when we're planning on starting the drainage improvements that will then be followed by the road paving. And you know, this time of year in the fall, sometimes we do have success with our grass restoration. It really just depends on the rain and the temperatures. So if we're lucky, when we get it restored, you may already have some grass coming through. However, that doesn't always happen, and often following construction, it takes a couple years to cycle through. Our contractors will be back next spring, early summer to reseed and work through that grass restoration. And we can also provide you as the residents additional ideas on how to best keep that grass in good condition. And at this point, we are ready for questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And then Colin, if for some reason one of the questions would need us to bring up the plans, please feel free to share your screen again. Is there anything in the chat box?
Yeah, we've got one, Carla. So there's a couple questions in here. I'll run through all of them, and then if we forget and have to go back, I'll reread them. So first question is, where's the water draining to? Is it going towards McCoy or Lear? And then kind of a tag along to that, the existing stormwater infrastructure, can it handle the additional stormwater draining to it? With the supporting statement, there's been issues with flooding coming out of the stormwater infrastructure at the bottom of Lear.
Yeah, so I can tell you that most of the drainage goes to Lear Road, according to what we will be providing, but I can let JMT take a stab at answering that latter part of the question. We are planning on connecting to existing infrastructure. So the pipe system should be able to handle what is there.
Yeah, thank you, Carla. Yeah, the drainage, we are tying into an existing system that is going to outfall into the channels that go down into Lear, down the hill, I believe. So as you travel south and come down the curve, that's where it'll be outfalling. So we're not adding any additional drainage area to the system. We are just providing a better way to convey it down to the existing infrastructure. So let's see what Mike mentioned here. He said there was issues with flooding at the stormwater structure at the bottom of Lear. That's not something we explicitly looked at, but we did help with the system on Clairmont, the conveyance system that we are tying into.
And
So
I
then-
think, sorry, Aaron, and I
No,
think
you're fine.
at least I saw part of the question. There was, people were concerned that maybe the existing pipe system may have been damaged. I know that there was a pipe on the side closest to Lear where the new homes were built. When that new pipe was installed, we did camera the storm sewer system. And that's something that we can do again. And it's always a good idea after you install stormwater to put a camera through and check the system, because some of that material will eventually wash through and you want to make sure it doesn't clog. So that's something that we can plan on doing.
So the next question is probably more for us, Carla, is how much wider will the paved surface be versus how wide it is now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, one of the things that we talked about and we alluded to in the focus on notices were that we were going to add a substantial berm. And the primary purpose of a berm is to stabilize the edge of road. But we had looked at the idea of making a wider berm to install the pipe underneath that. But with this drainage solution, I don't believe that we'll need the berm to be quite as wide. When we get the final design, we can look to see how wide that berm is going to be. But I'm not anticipating that it's going to be 1.5 feet on each side at this point. I'm going to look at that 1 foot range on each side in order to really hold the edge of the pavement together.
Will we be evaluating all of the existing tiles? I think you might have touched on this one. Many are damaged. Observed this when work was done on the water main in front of our home and had to have several repairs.
Yeah, and just to point out, I know that that new pipe that was installed on the south side of the road, there is existing storm tile that we were pointing out we'd be connecting to on the north side. And we are aware some of that storm sewer pipe isn't in the best of condition, so we can evaluate that. And if that means we need to have a little bit more installed in order to make sure we can make a proper connection, we can do that.
The next question is, what does a catch basin and pipe system mean? Will you lay pipe on the west side of Clairmont?
So I know some of the terminology can be a little bit difficult. The catch basins are yard drains. So you'll be looking at grates in the yard, and essentially we'll be looking at regrading the yards in order to better define the low spots so that that grate is at the lowest spot in the yard. We're not looking to create a bunch of new low points. We're going to try to utilize the low points that already exist and just try to make it so that when you have that ponding water, the water has somewhere to go. I know that we added a good number of catch basins because trying to move the water out of the yards in a way was something that we thought would be very important. And the other, I think, key aspect is if you have a yard that is low and your home is significantly lower than the yard, or sorry, than the road, you can put in a private pipe system and connect to the pipe system in the road if you have the drop. So let's say maybe you have ponding issues in your backyard. If you can reach our system, you may be able to do some more drainage improvements to help your foundation or your yard. And did I miss some part of the question, Aaron?
Yeah, the tail end there is, will there be a pipe on the west side of Clairmont?
I don't believe the pipe system isn't starting closest to McCoy.
There wasn't clarification there on exactly where on the west side.
Yeah, so the north and south, we will have the pipe system on both sides of the road, but the pipe system isn't going all the way down to McCoy Road. And then it'll be stopping short of Lear Road, but the pipe will be on both sides of the street, just only one at a time, if that makes sense. So we'll be running it along one side, it'll cross the street, and it'll run along the other side, and then we'll have catch basins where the pipe isn't running that cross over and connect. And that's something that if you want to look at your house in a little bit more detail, we can go through that with you.
What material will the berm consist of?
The berm, is Sebastian on here? Yeah, I see Sebastian.
Yes, I'm on here.
Can you go through the materials for a typical berm, please?
Well, the typical berm usually has either like a 3 or 4 gravel or like a number 8 smaller pea gravel with a AC tack coat that will hold all the stone together without it washing out against the edge of the berms or washing in your yards.
Yeah, so when we stabilize the road in-house, when Public Works goes out, I believe that our methodology isn't quite as substantial as the berm will be when we have a contractor do it, since a lot of that stabilization that we do in-house through our Public Works team is meant to be temporary and until we can have a better stabilization. So I would anticipate this gravel mixture and the tack coat holding up better, but over time, if the road drops off, we will have to do some repairs.
Next question is one I actually missed a little farther up, but how long do we expect the roadway to be closed when this work starts?
That's a good question. We haven't gotten into a maintenance of traffic detail, but since the storm system is primarily going to be installed along the side of the road, our goal will be to maintain traffic. we want everybody to have access to their driveways. The only time that might not be possible is when a storm pipe would be going directly underneath. But even then, we have the ability to use plates in order to get people in and out of their drives. So I don't have the exact construction timeline. JMT, do you guys have an estimate on how long you think this might take?
Typically, when a contractor installs a storm sewer across the pavement and across the drive, we try to maintain obviously access across the drive at all times using the plates. But typically it takes less than a day normally to install the pipe, depending on the maintenance of traffic phasing and how they want to build the pipe. I would assume based on the material that it can probably be installed rather quickly. So it depends on, there may be the aggregate that would be like, they would install the pipe, they would put the soil back on the aggregate and then rebuild the pavement. It may take a couple days to get all the layers of the asphalt down, but there will be some means of traveling across it. So the crossings are localized, and it typically doesn't take very long, normally a day or less. So I don't think it's going to impact travel a lot. And even at that, depending on the material that's used for the storm sewer, it can be done part width. But if it's a single section of pipe, it may just, it's faster and cheaper and more economical for the contractor to just install the trench, put the pipe in, and then backfill it as soon as the pipe's installed. So it typically doesn't take that long.
Yeah, so once we finalize the design and get the plans to Strasser Paving, who will be doing the installation of the drainage, they will be providing us with a construction schedule. And from that, we will be able to provide you guys as the residents how long we anticipate the drainage work to be, and whether or not there's going to be a gap between that and the paving of the road. But yeah, we'll have a better timeline once we finalize design.
And I will say, I will add one more thing too. The depth of the storm sewer system is pretty shallow, so that helps with the timeline for construction too. So if they don't have to dig down that deep, they don't have to. There's not as many regulations that they have to follow to shore the installation of the pipes. So it's relatively shallow, so it should be able to be, the pipe should be installed, and then they can backfill as soon as the pipe's installed.
So will Lear Road east of Edge Hill also be repaved?
Yes, their road is also being paved.
And how large will the catch basins be?
We didn't have them specified, but I believe they'll be 24-inch diameter typically.
Yeah, they're about 2 feet wide on the widest section. So there won't be, you would only see the top part of the catch basin as well, not most of it. And there's not like a big concrete apron around it like you would see on in like a larger ditch section. So you'll still see the grate. There are some existing grates out there. That's one thing that we'll have to look at, is the type of grate. There's flat grates, and there's the little, I don't know if they call them like the beehive grates, but the ones that are kind of rounded at the top. Easier to see, but maybe not as aesthetically pleasing to look at. So that'll be something that we look at in the design, but they're about 2 feet wide, and they're circular too.
Are there any improvements proposed to the edge of the road on Lear, which may not support a berm?
So when we pave Lear and any part of Clairmont Road, because there are locations where it will be very difficult to berm, we'll do what we can to stabilize the edge. I don't have the exact designation for the berm thickness on Lear, but we can look at that a little bit closer. We know that area is very tight, and we want to stabilize that edge to the best of our ability. I'm sure because of the slope that the water just rages down there when there's a flash flood.
Then the last question that we've got right now, we kind of already touched on how long will the road be not passable for cars and where do we park? I think I'll just re-answer that question. We'll have a much more accurate answer once we get Strasser Paving on board and get a schedule out of them. But realistically, you should have access to your house the vast majority of the time, with maybe short stints where you can't get across your driveway for very short periods of time, but most of the time there should be a steel plate allowing you to cross any potential trench on your driveway. Had a few more questions roll in. How deep into each yard will be impacted?
Do you have the depth of the storm sewer? I'm guessing just 2 feet.
It's close, right?
Yeah, it's about 2.5 feet, depending on which catch basin you're looking at. We're trying to minimize how deep we're going because we're trying to tie into that downstream existing inlet, which is about 2.5 feet deep from where it's at on the surface.
To add into that and to ask another question, I think the spirit of the questions is asking the depth from the roadway into the yards. How far away from the edge of the road are we proposing to put these pipes and catch basins?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is we're keeping it within the right of way, and we want to keep it far enough away so that it isn't impacted and that so that we can stabilize the edge of that road. And ultimately, we want to make sure that we are able to regrade the road, the yards, so that we can get the low point for all of those. We're still working on the final design, so we can try to pinpoint those locations, but they should be pretty close to the road. And just going back to one of the questions, Isai Garcia is on here, and if for any reason you have concerns about getting into your driveway, absolutely reach out to the city, and we need to know if you're having a baby here around the time of construction. We want to know about it and have plates on standby, or if you have medical needs or you require medication to be delivered and it's important to make sure that there's access, let us know so that we can make sure to have the accommodations ready for you.
So will the meeting minutes be posted online, and is the project schedule and project details available online as well? I'll take this one real quick for you, Carla. So I believe we'll be posting the recording of this meeting on the city website. And then for project schedule and project details, right now, we don't have those in hand. Once we finalize these plans here shortly and get Strasser Paving on board, we'll get a much more detailed schedule and a little more detail on that, which we will send out to everybody, make sure everybody is aware of. And then who should we contact to determine the impact to our property?
I'd start with Mandy. I know I put her email out there that way. Anyone who's available as part of this team will be able to take the final design plans and reach out. And you can do that in a couple different ways. I know some people are not as comfortable looking at the plans, the overlay. Don't get me wrong, JMT, those, I thought the view was awesome. But if for some reason you want us to send you the drawing and maybe meet with you out in the field to go over it with you, we can do that as well. So start with Mandy, and then it will likely be Aaron, Isai, or myself, possibly Sebastian. That's one of the reasons we have so many team members on here, just so that we can be available for the residents that have questions about this moving forward.
That's the last of the questions. I don't see any hands that are raised right now.
All right, then thank you so much for attending. As mentioned, we will save the recording of this meeting, and we can post it online, or if there's someone you know that would like to see it, let us know. And when the final design is ready, really try to send that email to Mandy so that we can provide those the updates to you via email, but we'll be handing out paper notices as well. So everybody have a great evening, and thank you so much.
Thank you all.